I'm very pleased to welcome today New York wrestler and new Ohio Valley wrestling recruit Mason Raige. Mason, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
The pleasure's mine. Thanks for having me.
Mason, you've recently been accepted into the OVW territory. Can you tell us a little bit more about the journey that's brought you this far and how you started out in the business?
Absolutely. I've been a wrestling fan for probably most of my life. Probably at the time Hulk Hogan got really big in World Wrestling Federation at the time, I just gotten hooked. And as a kid, my life revolved around the sport of wrestling. I used to set alarm clocks in the middle of the night to get up and watch Wrestling Challenge on Channel 9 here in New York. I decided to become a professional wrestler, actually, when the show Tough Enough started to air. But because before that, I had never known that wrestling was something you could go to school for. I just had no idea about the business itself, and while that show exposed a lot of the business, it's also kind of brought to light the fact that, hey, maybe I could give this a shot. And I had contemplated it for months and months and months, because I'm the type of person that when I do something, I put my all into it. And I said, is this something that I really want to pursue? And I just started researching schools. I went to a couple of places, and as cliche as it sounds, the first time I stepped into a wrestling ring, it just felt like the perfect fit. And I said, man, this is something I need to pursue. And I had started training at the New York Wrestling Connection School, which is in Hicksville, Long Island, New York. It was basically a dingy garage. It had no heat in the winter. It had no air in the summer. Just basically a garage with a wrestling ring and racks. That's all that was there. And we just went through the training, and I started doing local shows up until the point where Ohio Valley was having a tryout in Louisville, Kentucky. And I decided to give it a shot. I went for the tryout and got a call back, and they said, we want you to come on down. I was so psyched, and now my life is taking a whole new path, and I'm very excited about it.
When you first started training as a professional wrestler, did you have any illusions shattered? Did you find it to be very different to what you had expected from what you'd seen on TV?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. I think as in any profession or craft, when you actually get into it and see what happens behind the scenes, you're no longer a fan, you become more of a student. And that's what happened to me with professional wrestling. The illusion that I had cultivated for years and years was definitely shattered, because you learn basically the tricks of the trade. Although the reality that people don't understand is that there really aren't that many tricks. It's a lot more painful and a lot more physical than people think. But a lot of the unprofessionalism that happens in wrestling, the pettiness, the nonsense, the backstabbing, that is very prevalent on the independent scene, and I can only imagine what it's like when you're talking about contracts worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Illusions were shattered, but the passion is stronger than ever.
Now, your style is very much that of a big powerhouse, brutal wrestler. Who would you say has been your biggest influence on your wrestling style?
Well, this is not to be taken as an insult to the smaller, more high flyers,
sure,
those type of wrestlers. But when I think of professional wrestling, I think of big, strong, powerful guys who could basically go into any bar, into any establishment, and just take anybody they wanted to and throw that person through the wall.
And you've done that too, haven't you? You've done that too, haven't you?
I most certainly have.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm as proud of it, but I've done it. But when I was a kid, I was always fascinated by powerful guys like Hulk Hogan, Rocky Balboa, that type of strong mentality and that physical presence. So growing up, I always loved the big, strong, powerful guys again like Hulk Hogan, Jesse the Body Ventura, Ken Patera,
yeah,
the Road Warriors. Yeah. Guys like that, they just commanded my attention, because they just, whether or not, because the debate was always, is wrestling fake, is it real, what's the deal? Whether it was or wasn't, these guys were the real deal, and you knew that. Later on, a guy like Davey Boy Smith, just the power, the slam, the throwing a human being from one side of the ring to the other, that stuff kind of always commanded my attention, so I try to bring that intensity into the ring with me. I know my own limitations. I'm not much of a flyer. I'm not going to be a guy who's going to do a 450 splash and wow the crowd, but my goal is always to leave the crowd with something. And I think taking, a couple of guys at once, hoisting them up and slamming them down is going to be something that's going to make the crowd say, hey, that guy was pretty intense.
You captured the New York Wrestling Connection Tag Team title with Dickie Rods in January of this year. How did it feel winning your first title?
It was awesome. I mean, the team, to be honest with you, when they came to us and said, you know, we're thinking of putting you guys as a team, it's not something that either of us had wanted to do. I had always liked tag team wrestling, but I wasn't a tag team wrestler. It's not an avenue I really wanted to go. But, you know, they presented it to us. There was really nothing else to do but put all our effort into it. Winning the belts that night was amazing because it was just the feeling of accomplishment. It was knowing that the promoters and the bookers and the management said, you know, these are the guys who can represent us as the champion. It carries a lot of weight and a lot of responsibility to be a champion. At least in my eyes, I feel that you're a figurehead, a representative of the company. So to be a champion means, in my opinion, to carry yourself as a champion at all times, in the ring, outside the ring, with the fans. Wherever you are, you got to be a champion. You got to look like a champion. You got to act like a champion. You got to sound like a champion. Title means that you are the best, and you are at the top of everyone's list, and you're taking on the best challengers there is. So winning that belt was a phenomenal feeling.
Congratulations! It must have been awesome.
Thank you.
Speaking of your website again, you have a photo on there of you with one of New Zealand's own, Mana. Have you and Mana ever actually locked up, or was that just a one-off stare down?
Actually, Mana and I were on a collision course in the NWA Cyberspace, which is a promotion in New Jersey. I was taking on a lot of his managers, representatives that are collectively known as the Foreign Exchange, and Mana is their heavy hitter.
Yeah.
For some reason, the manager there thought it would be a good idea to feed these weak little guys to me rather than just throwing the big dog in there with me. So Mana and I were on a collision course. Whether or not that's actually going to come to pass, I'm not exactly sure, because the path of wrestling is probably going to take me down, well, definitely is going to take me down to Louisville, Kentucky. But I do hope to lock up with Mana. He's a powerful guy. He's an excellent competitor, and he's definitely someone who would push me, and I'd be sure to push him right back.
We've all heard of Matt Stryker, the high school teacher who was recently sacked from his teaching job, and he's now appearing on Raw. You've known Matt for some time, is that right?
Absolutely. Matt and I go back a couple of years. I think Matt probably would tell you he maybe made a few bad choices, but he's a quality guy, he's a class act, and he's a talented performer.
You've got something else in common with Matt Stryker, in that you're also a high school teacher. What do you teach?
I teach high school English, believe it or not. When people hear that, they say, oh, you're a teacher. They say, oh, you must teach phys ed. You must be a gym teacher. Actually, no, I do teach English. I'm a fan of literature. I do like poetry. I don't want people to know that, but it actually is true. So I taught English for the past 7 years in a high school on Long Island.
Do your students...
It's a job that I love.
Yeah? Do your students come and see you wrestle?
Actually, I had kept the wrestling and the Mason Raige persona a secret for about 2 years. I had a great run. No one had known about it. No one had heard about it. And I was always worried about it because as a teacher, you set a certain example, and as a wrestler, especially a heel wrestler, you set a different example. I was definitely trying to keep the worlds apart. I didn't want my worlds to be colliding, to reference Seinfeld and George Costanza. I kept it a secret for as long as I could until I was on the cover of our newspaper, a local newspaper here, actually not so much a local newspaper, a large newspaper on Long Island called Newsday. They were doing a story on the wrestling training school where I was at. So the management had called me up, and they said, listen, we really want you to come down for the photo shoot. And I said, no way, I can't do that. Definitely not, because I didn't want any exposure. Of course, I got my arm twisted, and probably secretly I wanted them to finally find out, because it's not that, don't get me wrong, it was nothing I was embarrassed about. It was just something that I just felt I wanted to keep separate for as long as I could.
Yeah.
Well, I went down to this photo shoot. Long story short, I end up doing a one-handed press slam on the cover of the newspaper. This was on a Sunday.
Awesome.
Monday morning in school, it was the talk of the school. Every kid knew about it. They all brought in newspapers for me to sign. The school newspaper actually ended up writing a big article on Mason Raige, so it was pretty wild. And now they are. They're showing up to the matches, and they love it. They really can't get enough of it.
That is very cool. But I mean, you were saying before about how you want to keep, you know, Mason Raige separate from, you know, the teacher in the classroom. Well, do you think your students, do you think they find it hard to separate the, you know, the intense heel persona with, you know, the teacher in the front of the room?
To be honest with you, I don't know how much different the two are. I am very intense in the classroom. I set my standards very high, and I expect a lot of the kids. Teaching is really not that much different from wrestling, which is pretty ironic.
Really? I would never have had them compared before.
Absolutely. As a teacher, I have a persona. I carry myself as a professional. You know, we all wear different masks in our lives. Where, you know, you at work are much different from how you are at home as when you're with your friends and things like that. So I'm a very intense guy, and that was always given in the classroom. What was funny about teaching was there were times before the kids knew I was a wrestler, they would say to me, "Do you think you could beat up Brock Lesnar? Do you think you could body slam the Big Show?" And I used to feign ignorance. I say, "Brock who? I never heard of it." Meanwhile, I'm watching the show just like they are, but they had no clue. It was so strange, and I used to say to myself, I wonder if they know. Are they up on this? Do they know what's going on? But they all, and I have had people for years say to me, "You look like a wrestler. You should be a wrestler." And it just all fell into place. But I think that the kids, when they see me initially, they're freaked out because they go from the shirt and tie to tights and boots, and I'm punching and kicking and choking, throwing somebody from point A to point B. So they get a little freaked out, but I guess the test is they still keep coming back. So I guess whether or not they can separate it, I'm not sure, but they seem to really get a kick out of it.
You ever threatened anyone with a body slam if they didn't do their homework?
Actually, most definitely I have. I've even pressed kids in class, and we got a little silly actually towards when it first came out. And then once it came out, I said, well, let me put a website up at this. I'm just going to go all the way with it. And then they had checked out the website, which is www.masonraige.com, cheap plug. And they had seen some of my moves and some of the stuff that I'd done, and they said, oh, you couldn't do that to me. So I would pick the biggest kid up, tell him to come in front of the class. I'd press him over my head, and I'd rep him about 6 or 7 times.
Wow.
And then you say, all right, now that's enough. Do your work. And you got 30 kids with their heads down, pens in hand, doing their work. I never have a problem with them after that.
What a great teaching technique. That's very unique.
Yeah. You won't find that in any teaching book or any technical class, but it does work for me.
Getting back to WWE appearances, you had your first one on Raw on July 11th. You were part of the security team in the Edge Lita Matt Hardy segment. And how did it feel to be part of a segment that just got the biggest pop of the night?
Indescribable. I could not do justice with words on how it felt to be there. I'd gotten a call at about 4:15 to get to New Jersey, to the Meadowlands. Now, I live in Long Island. It's about 75 miles, but if you've ever been to New York, the traffic here is horrendous. So I had to jump in the car and get there. I flew down. By the time I got there, they had said, we're pretty much set with everybody. We're not going to need anybody, but come on in, fill out your paperwork, we'll pay you, and then we'll see what happens. So I was definitely dejected. I wanted to be on television. I wanted to be there. But, hey, I said, at least I got the phone call. That's a step in the right direction. So I met with Sergeant Slaughter, and then I met with Michael Hayes, who was the agent. And he said, this guy's big. Let's use him. So I knew I was in right there. It was awesome. So we did this whole security thing, and all they said to us was, we need security out by the ring. Something may happen. That's all we knew. So
did you know that Matt Hardy had come in and attacked Edge and Lita before Edge's match?
Actually, I had a feeling when they said something may happen. I said, well, this has got to be Matt Hardy. And then I saw Matt Hardy jump Edge. I was about 5 feet from where that happened. And then I said, well, now what the heck is happening? Okay, there's Matt Hardy. Now I don't understand what's happening. So I thought maybe they had something else. Someone else was in the had no clue what they were doing.
You were in the ring pretty fast.
Well, I've actually worked as a bouncer for a long time, and very comfortable in the middle of an altercation. So I'm down at the ring, and all of a sudden I see this guy jump the barricade, jump into the ring, and just instincts took over. I got in there, and to be honest with you, I didn't even know if it was Matt Hardy or not, because the action was so fast. Those guys were ripping into each other like two animals, and all I thought was, hey, I've got to get in there and do my job, and I just inserted myself and you know, did what I needed to do. But it was just to hear that crowd erupt like that they did, it was phenomenal. It just goosebumps, every hair on your body stands up, the adrenaline, you just feel like you could pick up the world and put it on your shoulder. It was so spontaneous and so real, and just so, it was unbelievable just to get in there and just to be involved in it, and then afterwards to really reflect upon it, because as it's happening, you're just in the moment. But what I tried to do was really look around and take it all in, because the Meadowlands, the Continental Airlines Arena, is a place that I had been to. I've seen hockey games there. I've seen basketball games. I've seen wrestling for years and years and years there. And to actually be in the middle of the place where, 20,000 people are watching the action and you're a part of it, it's phenomenal. It's indescribable.
It looked to me as if Matt and Edge looked as if they sent one or two stiff shots your way, and it was really that intense and real in the ring between those two guys?
Absolutely. They were punching and they were pulling each other's hair, and they just wanted to hurt each other. I have made a mental note, and anyone who hits me will not get away with it. So one time or another, I will get my hands on Edge and or Matt Hardy and make them pay for those stiff shots. Absolutely.
Awesome. Now, as we know, you were recently accepted, you were recently part of the WWE OVW tryout camp, and as a result of this, you've been accepted into OVW full-time. How did it feel when you discovered that you'd been accepted, that this was really, really going to happen?
Surreal. I went down there basically what I really wanted to do was just kind of match up against the guys who were there. I said, because I watched wrestling on television, and I started on the independents, and as a big man on the independents, I wanted to test myself against the top of the heap, the upper echelon of wrestling. Ohio Valley offers, there's about 35 guys in the WWE who went through OVW. That's the place to go if you're going to get into the WWE. I went down to this tryout, and I walked in. I was very confident. I was definitely nervous. It's an unknown territory. It's a whole new experience. You're in front of Jim Cornette, Danny Davis, and Rip Rogers, who combined have over 100 years of experience in professional wrestling. So it was a little intimidating. But when I got there, I just kicked it into autopilot, and I said, let me give them all I can do, let them see what I had, and then we'll just take it from there. To be honest with you, I didn't know what I was going to do, because if they called me back, I have a job, I have a career, I have a family, I have a home. How am I going to go to Kentucky? But I said, let me just go down there and see what happens. And a couple of weeks later, I got a call back, and they said, we want you to come on down, and we've got a spot for you here if you're willing to relocate. And I didn't even have to think about it. I said, absolutely.
That is fantastic.
Right now, I'm among boxes in my basement, getting ready to do the big move.
Yeah, well, it's a really big move for you and your family from New York to Kentucky. You must be feeling some trepidation about the transition?
Trepidation, to say the least. Yeah, I'm a wreck. I'm a wreck right now. I'm so excited about it. I'm so pumped up. This is what I want to do, and it's where I want to be. But you're talking about a complete change of life.
Very much so, yeah.
It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, but I just kind of feel that without risk, there's no reward. I feel that if I don't do this, one day when I'm 50 years old, I'm going to look in the mirror and say, I was on Raw once. I had a wrestling career that could have gone somewhere, but I didn't have the guts to do it. I said, now I need to do this. The timing is now. The time is right. And once I get down there, it's going to be 100% intensity. There's not going to be anybody who can stop me from going where I need to go. A lot of people ask me, well, is your goal to get a WWE contract? And I say, actually, it's not. That's not my goal. That's not my goal. It's a goal.
Right.
My goal is to be an exceptional WWE wrestler. to be someone who goes down in history as one of the best. That's my ultimate goal, to make such an impression on the sport that people will always remember the name, that I'll be put up there with the big-time classic stars. I'll one day get inducted into the Hall of Fame. I really, really plan to make a mark on this business.
Well, I don't think there's much doubt of that. It seems that you're well and truly on your way there. And we'll be wishing you all the best over here in New Zealand for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
The final question for you today, Mason, looking at today's products, you know, not just WWE, but TNA, Ring of Honor, who would you say you're a big fan of at the moment?
That's a good question. Actually, like I had said before, and unfortunately for me, this is true, when you get involved in something and you know the inner workings of it to a certain degree, you no longer are a fan. You become more of a student. And I'm definitely a student of the game of professional wrestling. I will watch anybody. I will keep, if I'm flipping through the channels and I come across TNA or I come across, you know, it used to be like, there used to be Glow Wrestling back in the day. I would watch anything to do with professional wrestling. You ever see that Geico commercial with the two wrestlers? I'll sit and watch that. I just love the sport of wrestling. So I'm more of a student. I feel that if I can watch any 2 guys, 4 guys, 2 women, whatever it is in a match, there's always something that I can learn. Either something good to do or something bad to do. And I always make mental notes. So as a student of the game, I'm always watching. So I keep my eye on WWE, TNA, Ring of Honor, all of the indie wrestlers. I spend a lot of time really gathering as much as I can about the sport, because if you're going to be somebody in the sport, you've got to know the history of it. It's like Mike Tyson. People kind of have this idea of Mike Tyson as being this barbaric animal, and he's definitely earned that reputation. But what a lot of people don't know is that Mike Tyson probably knows more about boxing today than anybody in the world today. He's such a student of the game because he's so passionate about it, and I kind of feel I have that same mentality.
Well, Mason, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today, and we'll be watching your career with great interest, and really we wish you and your family the very best of luck as you move to Kentucky, and the very best of luck with your career in OVW and definitely beyond. We hope to be watching Mason Raige for a very long time.
I hope so. I hope so. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Kirsty. I really appreciate it. And I think you guys do a tremendous job with your website.
Oh, well, perhaps we'll see you in New Zealand.
Great job with your writing.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, perhaps we'll see you in New Zealand with WWE someday.
I'd love to be there.